Hey, what's going on everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at the DJI RS2 and specifically how to set up and install the Raveneye. So before we jump into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There's plenty more content about the RS2 coming, so stay tuned for that. So let's jump into the video and I'll show you how to set it up. All right, so inside of your RS2 combo pack, you're going to get the Raveneye already in the pack with a whole bunch of little cables. If you buy the RS2 by itself and not in the combo pack, you won't get the Raveneye in it, but you can buy it separately. But inside of the combo pack, you're gonna get the Raveneye and heaps of different little cables that you're gonna use to connect everything. Now, depending on the camera setup will depend on which cables you use. So I'm gonna be setting it up on the EOS R. And if you are curious to see whether your camera is compatible with the Raveneye transmitter, DJI has a compatibility list, which I'll link in the description below. So if you want to check that out, if you are curious about whether your camera will work with the Raveneye. So the Raveneye itself has 3 ports. So it's got a HDMI, RSS, and the power port. It's also got the 2 antennas on either side. And on the bottom, it's got a cold shoe, which we use to connect it to the bottom of the gimbal here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to actually lock off the gimbal itself. Because we are adding a whole bunch of different weight to it, it's going to throw out the balance. So we're going to have to balance it after we have the Raveneye installed. There's no point doing it now. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to grab it, our Raveneye, and we want to connect it underneath the gimbal. And we want it to have, so if you look at the Raveneye itself, you can see which way the antennas pop out. And we want to keep the antennas away from the actual gimbal motors. So we don't want it pointing inwards towards where the motor is. We want to point it away. So what we'll do is we'll just unlock this part and we'll just slide it into the cold shoe until you hear a click. And then you have it locked in. Make sure it's locked in. And that's the first step done. Now what we want to do is we want to grab the cables and we want to start putting them in the ports. So the first thing we want to do is we want to connect the camera to the Raveneye. And with the EOS R, you have a mini HDMI. So that's what we're going to use. So this one's going to be mini HDMI to mini HDMI. So at the moment, it's on the left side because it's away from the motor. So we're going to plug in our mini HDMI to the Raveneye, and then we'll link it up to the HDMI port on the EOS R. So first cable done. Next one we've got is we're going to connect the power to the gimbal. So we've got a shorter 20 centimeter USB-C to USB-C cable, and this one's got the right angle connection, and we're gonna stick the right angle on the Raveneye. So this will be on the motor side of the gimbal. So we'll plug that in just to the side. So now that's in, we're gonna grab the other side, the other USB-C. And if you look up next to the actual motor itself, you have 3 connections. You might have to take off the cover, but if you take off the cover, you've got 3 different ports. And we're gonna put it in the bottom port, and that you'll see a little Wi-Fi symbol next to that. So we'll put it into that one. So finally, I have one last cord which I'm going to install, which you don't have to use for the Raveneye itself. I'm just going to install it so I can use the record button on the back of the gimbal to then trigger the camera's record. And it's the USB-C cable. This one is the 30 centimeter one, and I'm going to just plug it into the side of, so it's the double USB-C one. So I'm just going to plug it inside of the camera itself, the EOS R, and then bring the cable around underneath the lens and plug it into the top port on the gimbal. And now that will allow me to trigger record the camera itself from the gimbal. So now the cables are in, what we can do is we can rebalance the gimbal. So if you unlock all the ports, this should be all pretty much set up already. So make sure it's balanced properly. So now that it's all set up, we have the options of where we place the antennas. So we can place them out like so. And what I've found is if I'm shooting with the gimbal and I'm gonna leave the phone mounted on the actual gimbal itself, like so, you don't necessarily have to have these antennas out. Because it's so close to the Raveneye, you're not gonna need to have that extra range where it pops out. But if you have someone who's using the phone as a wireless monitor and they're away from you, putting the antennas out like so means you'll get that extra range. So if you are having some transmission issues, try putting the antennas out, but we'll leave it in for now. So now that that's all set up and it's balanced, what we want to do is we want to turn on the gimbal. Wait for that to load up. And if you do look under the back port, under the back antenna, if you just move that down, you'll see 3 white little dots. And that just means everything's set up and the gimbal is powering it at the moment. So what we want to do is you'll see next to the 3 little dots, you'll see the button. So we just want to press and hold that button and the light will turn red. And once it turns red, we want to grab our phones and we want to connect it. Now it uses Wi-Fi, so make sure you have your Wi-Fi turned on, and you also want to download the Ronin app. And when you get into it, you'll have to probably set up your DJI account, so email and password. Then once you're in the app, you'll see down the bottom, connect to Raveneye, and you'll get this little note that pops up and says, connecting to Raveneye will disconnect gimbal from DJI Ronin. And that pops up because you can't use the app to connect to the gimbal and the Raveneye at the same time. So just hit OK. Now to say searching for Wi-Fi, you can hit connect back in the app. So this is asking me to put in the password. And on the back of the actual Raveneye, you'll see right next to the on button, you'll see Raveneye's Wi-Fi password. So put that in. I've already connected it, but if you connect it through that, put in the password and that'll connect. Then once you've done that, hit OK. That'll start to load. And once you're connected, just hit the Raveneye and you'll get this screen on your phone. So once you've got this little screen and you can see the camera view, you have the Raveneye connected properly and working. You'll also see the green light on the back of the Raveneye. Now, so I'll take you through the app itself. So first thing, the top left-hand corner, you'll see the button of the little arrow, and that is to just get out of the app. Next down, you have the little dot with the 4 arrows pointing to it. So that just recenters the gimbal. So if I turn it off, it'll recenter the gimbal. Next, under that, if we hit that, we have Force Mobile and Virtual Joystick. So what that does, if we enable the Force Mobile, once you've done that, as you can see, it uses the gyroscope of the camera of the phone itself to move the gimbal. So wherever I tilt the phone to will be where the gimbal itself tilts to. And to get out of it, just get back into it, hit off, and that'll disable that. And then you also have all the settings, so the speed and smoothness. So you can adjust that to your liking. Next, we have the virtual joystick. If we just next to Force Mobile, hit the virtual joystick. If we turn that on, you'll see down in the bottom left-hand corner of the app, it's just a joystick to move the gimbal to where you want. And then on the right-hand side, you have the ability to rotate as well. So we jump out of that. And again, you have all your speed and smoothness settings. So we'll turn that off. Now, when you get into the app, you may have a little button like this, or it may already be up like that. Now, if it's like this, hit the button and it'll bring up these settings. So first off, the little arrow in the bottom left-hand corner, if you hit that, it just gets rid of that on your screen. Hit it again to bring it back up. So the first one, we have the zebras. So if I put that on and then overexpose the shot, you'll start seeing zebras pop up, which is great. Then next to that, if we turn that off, we have false color. So again, if we overexpose, you'll start seeing the false color tools pop up. Turn that off. Next we have focus peaking. So if we zoom right in here to the camera and we turn on focus, I'll just turn autofocus off this. You can see the red lines starting to pop up on what's in focus. Next we have LUTs. So you can install your own LUTs by going to custom. Well, first you've got to turn it on. Then you can install your own LUTs by going to custom, but you also have a bunch of default LUTs. So because I'm shooting Canon C-Log, I'd hit that button, hit OK, and the LUT turns on your phone, and we can turn it back off if we don't want it. And finally, we have these RGB and just black and white, and this will help us with seeing what's happening in each color channel and to see where if there's noise in the image, where it's coming from, especially in the blue channel. So on the bottom of the screen, you have your f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO, which you can adjust all from the app. So if we just hit the ISO button, we can adjust our ISO. Same with shutter speed and same with our aperture. Next up, on the top right-hand side, we've got our battery percentage. Next to that, we have this little icon, which is our settings. So we'll take you through the settings. So the Raveneye Assistant, if we turn that off, that is just all the settings we went through before. So our false color, our focus settings, zebra settings, that'll just get rid of that icon. So we'll turn that back on and it appears back in the bottom left-hand corner. Next up, we have the guide frame. So we turn that on. We have a whole bunch of different settings that we can use to help us with our framing. So we've got the 3x3, 6x4, and the golden ratio. So we'll turn that off. Next up, get out of that. Next up, we have aspect ratio. So we want to shoot with a 2:3:5. That appears there. It just helps us again with our framing. So if we're going to shoot and we're going to have the black bars on top and bottom, if we want it as a 2:3:5, it just helps us there. So we can help with our framing. So we'll turn that back to none. Next up, we have the safety zone marker. So we can set our safety zone for whatever percentage we want. Next, we have the focus peaking threshold. So if we put on our focus peaking, so you can see the red lines around the monitor there. And now if we turn it up, it'll lessen the lines. And if we turn it right down, you can see it just adjusts the sensitivity of the lines. So I like leaving it the default. I find that to be pretty nice. Next, we have the center marker. So again, this is just helping our framing. So we turn the center marker on. We've got the little plus in the center. We can have a diagonal and we can have the diagonal plus the center marker. Next up, we have the marker color. So if we turn our markers back on, we'll do this one, and we change our marker color, it just changes the color of the marker. So I like leaving it white. So again, next one, we have marker width, just how thick those lines are. Again, I like to just leave it as the default, the smallest one. Next, we have our shutter. So we've got a few different settings here. So cache means that on the right there, when you hit that little red record button, like I've done just now, that's going to record straight to the phone and not to the camera itself. So we change it from cache to shoot. What that'll mean is when we hit the record button on the app, it'll also trigger the record button on the camera, but it won't record to the phone itself. The last one there is our shoot plus cache, and that will just record when we hit the record button, it'll record to the phone and also trigger the recording on the camera. And finally, we have our max cache, so how much it'll record to the phone. So we only want a gig max to the phone. We hit that and that'll set that up and it won't go past that. Next, we have our Wi-Fi settings. So we can modify our password and username. And then finally, we just have the about, which we don't need to jump into. Then down the very bottom right, we have our playback button. So we have all our playbacks that we can just scroll through on our phone. And one thing we missed is just above the record button, we have this, and that'll just switch between whether we want to record or take a photo. So finally, the very last thing I want to touch on with the transmitter and the app is the ability to lock onto a subject. So what we can do, if we open up the app again, I'm just going to track the camera monitor. So if we just grab our finger and we just drag across the part we want to track. So at the moment, I've dragged across the camera monitor, and you'll see this sort of green box. If we let go, you can see it's now locked onto that. So you can do this with something like this, or with a person if you're walking with them. If you highlight and select that, it'll lock onto that subject. And now all I'm doing is just picking up the gimbal. I'm not touching anything else. So if I move it to the left, you can see it'll just automatically turn to keep track of the monitor. If I move it forward, it'll start tilting up. And if I move it back, it just keeps it that locked in place. So this is a great feature to have, and it works really well, especially when you're a single shooter, run and gun, and you just need to track a subject. That's a great feature to have included. All right, so that'll be able to do it for today's video. As you can see, the Raveneye is a really cool piece of kit that has a lot of features jam-packed into it. It's something I'm gonna be personally using a lot. So if you have any questions or comments about it itself, or you're having trouble setting it up, please leave them in the comments below and I'll try and help you out as best as I can. And if you did get something out of this video, please hit the subscribe button. There's plenty more content about the RS2 coming. So with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.